Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video in my Good Idea, Bad Idea series. This is a series where I go over ideas or suggestions to the game, and explain both the good sides and the bad sides of things to give you enough information for you to decide if it's a good idea or a bad idea. In this episode, I want to bring up the idea of either keeping or bringing new artifacts into the next expansion after Legion. Now before we begin, as I said in the title, this is just a suggestion that people talk about. Blizzard has confirmed that their current plan is to not carry over our artifact weapons beyond this expansion. So there's been a lot of discussion about this. Some people are for it in a big way, and some people are against it in a big way. I guess the best way to do this is to go over the current artifact system and sort of discuss the good and bad things about that to lay the groundwork, before we start talking about bringing them into other expansions. From my observation, they've been received pretty much down the middle. I don't see anyone saying that they're the best thing or the worst thing about the game. Regardless though, as always, let's start with the good. The major reason why I like artifacts is that it gives us more depth with our character progression. Up until now, if you think about it, what were the ways we would improve our characters? Well, you of course have leveling, but this is something you knock out very early into the expansion, and it isn't considered endgame by any means for MMORPGs. You also have the talent system, which is progressed through leveling, and the only other way honestly is increasing your eye level by getting gear. To power up your character, you looted gear, that was it. Maybe you would throw on an enchant or gem or something, but that was about the extent of it. Having these artifacts gives another way to make our characters more powerful other than gear, and it's flexible in the sense that you can do it solo. You don't have to raid or do dungeons or whatever to progress your character if you don't feel like investing too much time into the game that particular day. You can just knock out a few world quests if that's all you have time for, and you can say your character got a little better today, even if it was just marginally so. Before artifacts though, if that was the case, that's a day with no progress, at least in the realm of character progression. I think for MMOs to progress, evolution and character development is a huge thing, and up to Legion, World of Warcraft has lagged behind in that regard to a big degree. So artifacts sort of fill that void in my opinion. But like I said, there are bad sides to everything, so let's get into that. The biggest one, and this is what most people bring up, is that it's grindy. In fact, that's what a lot of people say about the whole expansion. And I think that's due to world quests, the way the loot works, and one of the biggest contributing factors, artifact power. Now I personally don't mind the grind. It's something that I actually enjoy, but not everybody's the same way, and I totally understand that. To a lot of people, powering up your artifact is more like a chore rather than a fun way to progress your character. Like, I gotta knock out my artifact world quests again today. I think one of the things that has separated World of Warcraft from other MMOs is that it's less grindy. It's been a game that you could always just hop in and play, even if you're not in a raiding guild or you don't do dungeons. Features like LFR and the group finder sort of facilitate this more casual playstyle, and you can at least see what most of the expansion has to offer without investing a ton of time into the game. Now this whole casual versus hardcore thing is a huge can of worms that I won't open in this particular video, but what I'm saying here is that people look upon time investments and how they're handled in very different ways. I think it's similar to the argument against garrisons in Draenor. You had these huge garrisons integrated with profession buildings, followers, missions, and all sorts of stuff. Now this isn't the sole reason why people didn't like them, but one of the problems was that it was so lucrative and such a big part of the whole expansion that if you didn't put time into them, you felt like you were quote-unquote missing out, which made people just not want to play at all. It was the same deal with raiding, hence the birth of LFR, and although it may be to a lesser extent with the way artifact knowledge works, it's the same deal with artifacts, I think. Once again, overall, I like artifacts and I don't have these problems. I'm just trying to convey the reasons why other people say they're bad. I don't think they're 100% perfect, but overall I think they're a good addition to the game. Now, do I think they should be in the next expansion? Well, it's a hard choice for me, but my answer personally is no. And it's because of what I mentioned earlier. Character progression evolution is something I think is hugely important to MMOs, and keeping it exactly the same way in the next expansion isn't really evolution. So personally, if it was a choice between artifacts and a new form of character progression, I would like to see that different form. Something more than just gear upgrades, but not the exact same artifact system again. But if it was a choice between artifacts or nothing at all, I guess I would choose the artifacts, but for me it wouldn't be ideal. Legion brought in so many new features like world quests, Mythic Plus, and these artifacts. I want more expansions like this with all new features and systems to keep me interested, and maybe keep the ones that are clearly good for the game like Mythic Plus mode in my opinion. The Burning Crusade brought 2 new races, flying mounts, and arenas. Wrath of the Lich King's big things were Death Knights, 10-man raids, and if you remember siege vehicles, which is kinda funny looking back. Cataclysm brought 2 more races, a revamped Old World, a new talent system, and reforging, and so on. I think bringing in new stuff like this is also really important, and that's what they should focus on. But like I said, it's a really hard choice for me since I do like them, and if it turns out that Blizzard changes their minds and they do bring them back, I wouldn't be upset or anything. As always though, I'll have a poll in the description so you can vote as well. So go ahead and vote in that if you want, and send me a message or leave a comment if you feel like going into more detail why you chose what you did. But anyways, as always for these, I like to talk about the previous episode's results and feedback before I conclude. In the last good or bad idea, I brought up the idea of character-wide artifact power. I guess this isn't as big of an issue now that we're getting that artifact knowledge catch-up mechanic in the next patch, but in this episode, I pitched the idea of having artifact power being character-wide, either at a rate of 100%, 50%, or something in between that for your unequipped artifacts to make changing specs more forgiving. Right now, there's so much investment into one spec through spec-specific legendaries and spec-bound artifact power, it's starting to become more and more cumbersome the further we get into the expansion and the more we progress down these specializations. So as a result, people are getting locked into certain specs. So this idea kind of eases off of that a bit. Through the poll, overall you guys were in the good idea range, with specific numbers being 43% for good idea, 39% being for good idea but at a reduced rate, 15% being bad idea, and 3% is either way out of 244 votes. Even though this is of course a very tiny sample size of the people who play the game, I think it sort of reinforces that people don't like the grind associated with artifacts, or at least doing them for a second or even third time. You can see this frustration in a comment by Charles W. He actually doesn't want character-wide artifact power, he would rather have character-wide knowledge. This kind of goes into the larger scope issue of restarting the grind if you switch characters and not specs, but it still exposes some of the bad sides of having a more in-depth character progression like I discussed earlier. Well, we're actually getting something similar to this in 7.1.5, so that solves that I guess. But the point I'm trying to make here is that while I like them, the whole artifact system isn't perfect, and if we do end up bringing it back in another form someday, hopefully Blizzard will improve upon it so it's released the best way that it could be. But that's about all I have for you for this episode. Go ahead and vote in that poll if you want, and remember, I'm not trying to sway or convince any of you to my side in these videos. I'm just sharing my thoughts and opening up a discussion about it since I find it interesting. Whatever option you decided to go for though, I hope you found the video interesting or entertaining in some way. I also hope you found it helpful. Give it a like if you liked it, and if you really liked it, let me know in the comments and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching, good luck, and peace.